of dignitaries are taking place at this event.
From Oregon, Earl Blumenauer.
From Pennsylvania, Robert Brady.
From Virginia, Eric Cantor.
From Maryland, Ben Cardin.
From Oklahoma, Brad Carson.
From Indiana, Julia Carson.
From North Carolina, Eva Clayton.
From Tennessee, Bob Clement.
California, Christopher Cox.
From Illinois, Phil Crane.
From New York, Joe Crowley.
From Texas, John Culberson.
From Illinois, Danny Davis.
From Virginia, Joanne Davis.
From Colorado, Diana Daggett.
From Florida, Peter Deutsch.
From California, Cal Dooley.
From New York, Elliot Engel.
From North Carolina, Bob Etheridge.
California, Sam Farr.
From Tennessee, Harold Ford Jr.
From Texas, Martin Frost.
From Iowa, Greg Gansky.
From Nevada, Jim Gibbons.
From Texas, Charlie Gonzalez.
From Tennessee, Bart Gordon.
Missouri, Samuel Graves.
From New York, Felix Grucci.
From California, Jane Harmon.
From New Jersey, Rush Holt.
From California, Mike Honda.
From Maryland, Steny Hoyer.
From Arkansas, Tim Hutchinson.
From Illinois, Henry Hyde.
From New York, Steve Israel.
From Illinois, Tim Johnson.
From Minnesota, Mark Kennedy.
From Wisconsin, Ron Kind.
From Illinois, Mark Kurt.
From Arizona, Jim Colby.
From Texas, Nick Lamson.
Rhode Island, James Longervin.
From California, Tom Lantos.
From Iowa, Jim Leach.
California, Barbara Lee.
From Texas, Sheila Jackson Lee.
From Michigan, Sandy Levin.
From New Jersey, Frank Lobando.
From New York, Nita Lowy.
From Connecticut, Jim Maloney.
From Colorado, Scott McGinnis.
From California, Howard Buck McKeon.
From Georgia, Matt Collins.
From California, Juanita Millender McDonald.
From Kansas, Dennis Moore.
From New Jersey, Bob Menendez.
From D.C., Eleanor Holmes Norton.
From D.C., Eleanor Holmes Norton.
From California, Doug Ossie.
From Idaho, Butch Otter.
From New York, Major Owens.
From New Jersey, Frank Pallone.
New Jersey, Frank Poloni.
From California, Nancy Pelosi.
From Pennsylvania, John Peterson.
Montana, Dennis Reberg.
From Alabama, Bob Riley.
From Michigan, Mike Rogers.
From New Jersey, Marge Rokima.
From Texas, Max Sandlin.
From Florida, Joe Scarborough.
From Illinois, Jan Schukowski.
From California, Adam Schiff.
From Virginia, Ed Schrock.
From Texas, Pete Sessions.
From Connecticut, Christopher Shays.
From California, Brad Sherman.
From Pennsylvania, Don Sherwood.
Missouri. From Missouri, Ronnie Shows.
From Virginia, Norm Sisiski.
From New York, Louise Slaughter.
From Arkansas, Vic Snyder.
From Ohio, Ted Strickland.
From Michigan, Bart Sukpik.
From Colorado, Tom Tancredo.
From California, Ellen Tauscher.
Lee Terry from Nebraska.
Mike Thompson, California.
From Ohio, Pat Tiberi.
From Colorado, Mark Udall.
Okay, J.C. Watts from Oklahoma.
From California, Henry Waxman.
From New York, Anthony Weiner.
From Washington, David Wu.
From New York, Jerry Nadler. We also have two former members of Congress. Dan Glickman, former Congressman, Secretary of Agriculture, is with us. And former Senator and member of AIPAC's Board of Directors, Rudy Boschwitz.
And from Kansas, Jim Ryan.
We have some state office holders from Pennsylvania, Bob Casey. From Colorado, State Senator Bob Gagendorn. From Kentucky, State Treasurer Jonathan Miller. And from Maryland, State Delegate Mark Shriver. Candidates for federal or statewide office.
From New York, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Andrew Cuomo.
From Massachusetts, former AIPAC President and Chairman of the DNC, Steve Grossman.
From Nevada, Drio Herrera.
From New York, Alan Skorsky.
Senator from Arkansas, Tim Hutchinson.
Now from the state of Israel, in addition to the Prime Minister who will be speaking later, representing Israel to the United States, Ambassador David Ivry. Ambassador to the United Nations, Yehuda Lankry. Deputy Chief of Mission, Rafi Barak. Defense Attaché, Major General Zev Livni. From the Prime Minister's office,
Uri Shani, Chief of the Prime Minister's Bureau.
Rafi Peled, the Director General.
Gideon Saar, Government Secretary.
Uzi Dayan, the head of the National Security Council.
Dora Gold, Special Advisor to the Prime Minister.
Brigadier General Gadi Eisenkot, Military Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Ra'anan Gisin, Advisor to the Prime Minister.
Odilia Carmon, the Prime Minister's spokesperson.
Gabi Fitzman, Economic Advisor to the Prime Minister.
Dani Ayalon, Deputy Foreign Policy Advisor to the Prime Minister. And from Israel's Foreign Ministry, Shmuel Ben Shmuel, Director of Diaspora Affairs.
Baruch Bina, Director of North America.
From Israel's Defense Ministry, Amos Yaron, the Director General.
Yitzhak Ben Israel, Head of R&D.
Kuti Moore, Director General for International Affairs. We also have some distinguished foreign visitors. Ambassador Yuri Ushakov of Russia. Ambassador Sodek Safeyev of Uzbekistan. Ambassador Alexander Filan of Greece. Ambassador Urato Kazero Makoli of Cyprus. Ambassador Andres Beanki of Chile. Ambassador Abdul Wahab Al-Hejri of Republic of Yemen. Ambassador Kosyanty Grashenko of Ukraine. Ambassador Bakhtibek Abdrisev of Kyrgyzstan. Ambassador Ivis Ruanis of Latvia. Ambassador Ulrich Faderspiel of Denmark. Ambassador Alfred Dafego of Switzerland. Ambassador Przemysław Gruszyński of Poland. Ambassador Dr. Peter Moser of Austria. Ambassador Vygudis Ušakis of Lithuania. Ambassador Jim Bolger of New Zealand, Ambassador Martin Bujoturai of Slovakia, Ambassador Filip Dimitrov of Bulgaria, Ambassador Ariel Rivari Arias of Guatemala, Ambassador Guillermo Alfredo Ford Boyd of Panama, Ambassador Marlene Fernandez del Granado of Bolivia, Ambassador Zina Andriana Ariavelu of Madagascar, Ambassador Arlet Gonzimios of Luxembourg, Ambassador Yusuf Abdul Rahman Nazibo of Kenya, Ambassador Dennis Antoine of Grenada, Ambassador Valery Tsepkalo of Belarus, Ambassador Darbonkin Krauchun of Slovenia, Ambassador John Lee of Sierra Leone, Ambassador William Bull of Liberia, Ambassador Roberto Saladin Salin of the Dominican Republic, and Ambassador Warmasena Rasaputram of Sri Lanka. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
My name is Lonnie Kaplan, AIPAC's chairman of the board. When we gathered in May for last year's policy conference, Israel's prospects for peace with her neighbors appeared bright on two fronts. An end to hostilities along the northern border seemed closer following Israel's withdrawal from Lebanon, and the appearance of progress on the Palestinian peace track preceded a highly anticipated summit at Camp David. At Camp David, Israel's willingness to compromise and negotiate an end to the conflict with the Palestinians was not met by Yasser Arafat. He flatly rejected the most far-reaching Israeli proposals ever made and opted instead for a coordinated campaign of violence and terror that continues to this very evening. Similarly, Israel's overtures for peace were met by violence along its northern border, where Hezbollah has continued its cross-border attacks, killing and abducting soldiers and civilians, even after the UN certified that Israel had completed its withdrawal from Lebanon. It was against this backdrop that the Israeli people went to the polls last month to elect as Prime Minister the man who pledged to restore their security. They elected Ariel Sharon, and they did so by the largest margin of victory in Israel's history. Ariel Sharon has spent his life protecting Israel and combating terrorism. He commanded troops in every one of his country's wars and was seriously wounded in battle twice. His actions in the field were daring and won him broad praise. In 1973, Sharon led his forces across the Suez Canal, an act credited with turning the tide of the Yom Kippur War in Israel's favor. In between Israel's wars, Sharon spearheaded a fight against terrorism as the commander of elite units, which carried out dozens of special operations against terrorists. The same ability to achieve results that characterized his life as a warrior has carried over into his work as a negotiator with Israel's neighbors. As a minister in the Begin government that signed a peace treaty with Egypt, he oversaw the evacuation of the Sinai Peninsula as part of that agreement. Later, as foreign minister in the Netanyahu government, Sharon helped negotiate the 1998 Wye River Accords, which paved the way for deep Israeli troop withdrawals under the Oslo process. During these difficult days for Israel, Sharon has sought to unite the country. He has formed a broad-based unity government and put into key positions well-known Israeli leaders such as Shimon Peres. While the new Prime Minister seeks to unite Israelis, he simultaneously is working to strengthen the historical and unbreakable ties between Israel and the United States. One of his goals as Prime Minister will be to achieve more profound reciprocal relations with America. In his first speech to the Knesset as Prime Minister, he declared, "We will act towards deepening the special relationship with our great friend, the United States." President Bush, Secretary Powell, Senate Majority Leader Lott, Senate Minority Leader Daschle, Speaker of the House Hastert, and House Minority Leader Gebhardt all have spoken with the new Prime Minister, welcoming him and pledging to work closely with him to strengthen ties. In a telephone call to congratulate the Prime Minister on his election victory, President Bush reiterated America's commitment to Israel, saying, "The United States and Israel share important strategic interests and objectives and enjoy a strong, long-standing relationship." After meeting with the Prime Minister in Israel, Secretary Powell said he was encouraged by Sharon's understanding of the situation Israel faces and said he is confident that the Prime Minister is going to do everything he can to reach out to the other side and get the violence down. While he was elected to restore a sense of security, Sharon is reaching out to Israel's neighbors, indicating a willingness to restart negotiations with them. However, he has made his conditions crystal clear. Israel will not negotiate under fire. Steps must be taken to end the violence and incitement before the talks will begin. Ariel Sharon is a man who has committed his life to the service of his country. He has fought for Israel on the battlefield and for peace and security at the negotiating table. He has seen firsthand the terrible costs of war and is working today to ensure for Israel a long-lasting and secure peace. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, Ariel Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you. Please be seated.
Some friends of you.
Yes. Thank you for the kind introduction. Distinguished members of Congress and the current administration, the leadership of AIPAC, Tim, Wuliger, Lonnie Kaplan, Howard Core, presidents in the past, and I believe still many presidents here, in the future, Ambassador Lauder, Ambassador Ivry, Lankry, Ambassador for Israel, Ambassador Indik, American Ambassador in Israel, many other respected, distinguished ambassadors, I have to ask you forgiveness. I don't think, however, that I'll be able to remember all the names that you called. Maybe next time I will remember more. Ladies and gentlemen, and especially I would like to welcome hundreds of students that participate here. Thank you. Thank you. And now some words to the students. We need you, all of you in Israel, and very soon. But please don't rush now to buy tickets already. But we really need you. We need all of you. Today, all of us will remember our prisoners of war and missing soldiers, and that's what it symbols. And I hope that we'll make every effort to bring them back home. I bring you greetings from Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the Jewish people. Thank you. The eternal capital of the Jewish people for the past 3,000 years, and of the state of Israel for the past 52 years, and forever. Jerusalem belongs to all the Jewish people. We in Israel are only custodians of the city. Only under the sovereignty of Israel has Jerusalem been open to all faiths. Jerusalem and the Temple Mount, the holiest site to the Jewish people, is something you should stand up and speak out about. Jerusalem will remain united under the sovereignty of Israel forever. I stand before you today, first and foremost as a Jew. I am a Jew. For me to be a Jew is the most important thing. This strong Jewish identity is a central theme in my life and will be the execution of my responsibilities as Prime Minister. I want to work to strengthen the relationship between Israel and Jews all over the world. I have established I have established a national unity government to unite the people of Israel, but unity among Jews is vital worldwide. Unity is our source of strength. The Jewish people have one small, tiny country. It is the only place in the world where Jews have the right and the capability to defend themselves by themselves. For 2,000 years, we had to rely on others for our defense. Now we control our own destiny. Exercising this right strengthens the security of Jews everywhere in the world. Although I am 7,000 miles from home, I feel that tonight I am among friends. I would like to recognize the long-standing bipartisan support of the U.S. Congress for the State of Israel. I have come to Washington to deepen and strengthen the special relationship between our peoples. I wish to start by developing a close relationship with President Bush and his administration. Enhance our ties with both houses of Congress and with the American people as a whole. Ten years ago, under the leadership of President George Bush, Secretary of Defense Richard Cheney, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Colin Powell, the United States won a great military victory in the Gulf War that changed the face of the Middle East. An entirely new situation emerged that opened a window of opportunity, leading to the Madrid Peace Conference in the fall of 1991. The clear lesson of this period was that if there is a secure Middle East, there can be peaceful Middle East. Regional security proved to be a prerequisite for peacemaking. Face-to-face negotiations without the threat of aggression, violence, or terrorism. This became the underlying principle of the Madrid Conference and subsequent Israeli-Arab negotiations. In the years that followed Madrid, every Israeli prime minister sought to advance the peace process in his own way. All of Israel seeks peace. Based on my personal experience in all of Israel's wars, I am committed to achieving peace. But Israel needs peace with security. A peace that will last for generations. Unfortunately, the situation in the Middle East in 2001 is no longer the same as it was in 1991. The security of the region as a whole has eroded. A new wave of international terrorism is on the rise from Afghanistan to Lebanon, some of it state-sponsored. Most recently, acts of terror instigated by the Palestinian Authority, coupled with deliberate incitement, have become one of the primary sources of instability in the Middle East. Terrorism as a form of warfare is a strategic issue in our region. Most of the past wars in the region were instigated by acts of terrorism. Therefore, on the basis of past experience, even today, international terrorism can still threaten regional and global stability. Terrorism thrives when international norms and principles are ignored, when the peaceful resolution of disputes is displaced by violence and intimidation. Therefore, strengthening cooperation among all Western nations, including Israel, and concerted effort led by the United States are the only way to contain this dangerous trend. Regional security is eroding in the wider Middle East. Iraq has not been under UN monitoring for more than 2 years, and sanctions have been increasingly ignored. There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein is seeking to restore his mass destruction weapons capability and his quest for long-range missiles. Iran today is providing unprecedented support for terrorism. It not only backs Hezbollah, but also seeks to arm and train Palestinian organizations like Hamas and Islamic Jihad that are planning attacks within Israel and against Jewish and Israeli targets abroad. Today, Iran is continuing its effort to export fundamentalism, converting Lebanon into one of the main centers of international terrorism that will undermine the stability of the entire Middle East. Iran is already testing missiles that can strike Israel, but is planning to produce significantly longer-range missiles that will put the Middle East, Western Europe, Russia, and even parts of the United States itself at risk. Much of this ballistic missile technology comes from North Korea, but it also comes from the Russian Federation. In the Middle East today, the forces of instability feel they are gaining momentum. In this new environment, it is not surprising that the Arab-Israeli peace process has reached a stalemate. Syria is looking east to its ties with a resurgent Iraq and Iran, instead of better relations with the West. The Palestinians are waving the flags of Iraq and Hezbollah. Yasser Arafat and the Palestinian Authority are returning to the belief that they can defeat Israel by means of armed struggle. They feel that violence will produce further Israeli concessions. Arafat is willing to destabilize the entire Middle East, including moderate Arab regimes, in order to achieve his goals. The current situation in the Middle East can be reversed. Strong democracies determined to protect themselves can restore stability and build the foundations for lasting peace. First, I believe that Israel can reach an agreement with the Palestinians, and I will make every effort to reach such an agreement. This agreement will be based on two basic stages. In the first stage, which we have begun, we are already taking immediate steps to ease up restrictions and improve the economic situation of the Palestinian population. At the same time, we will maintain a relentless fight against terrorists and their supporters with an effort to prevent escalation. Steps and measures to stop the violence and restore stability must be taken by the Palestinian Authority as well as by the Israeli security forces. Let me emphasize that I draw a clear distinction between terrorists and their supporters on the one hand and the general population on the other. That's what I said before the elections, immediately after the elections, and that's what I started to do. With all the risk, and we already today paid the first casualty, father of 6 children, as a result of the fact that we removed our, I would say, barriers and removed our checkpoint. But I know that patience is needed, and we are going to continue in our effort to fight terrorists on one hand and to try and help the population on the other hand. That will be our policy. Despite intense diplomatic efforts of the last 9 months, it is clear that conditions are not yet ripe to conclude a permanent status agreement. However, Israel remains committed to agreements that previous governments have signed, that were ratified by the Knesset and also implemented by the other side. But Israel will not be bound by the record of past negotiations that failed. It is for this reason that I have called in the second stage for a new, more realistic approach of non-belligerency and a long-term interim agreement. More than ever, Israel needs security zones to protect it from the growing dangers in the Middle East. The Palestinians need contiguity and a better economic future, and time is needed to make sure that incitement and hatred are removed from Palestinian media and from school textbooks. And the children are taught the language of peace so that we can achieve real reconciliation and true end to the conflict. For this to occur, Arafat must understand first and foremost that he will gain nothing from violence. Israel will not negotiate while Israeli civilians and soldiers are under fire and under threat of terror. Regrettably, just last week, we received a definite intelligence warning that Yasser Arafat's own presidential guard, known as Force 17, was planning a car bomb attack in the heart of Jerusalem. Many Israeli lives were at stake. The Force 17 unit was located in Palestinian-controlled Ramallah. But Arafat was not prepared to stop this threat against Israel by himself. Israel placed a ring of checkpoints around Ramallah in order to catch the Force 17 unit. The PLO tried to create an international uproar about our actions, saying that we wanted to strangle Ramallah. We do not want to create barriers for the Palestinians, but I will do what is necessary to protect the people of Israel. Second, it is not enough to address the Palestinian issue alone. For 2 decades, many believed that if Israel would only make diplomatic progress with the Palestinians, the rest of the Middle East would fall into place. That has not happened over the last 10 years. The wider source of regional instability must be neutralized. It is imperative that Iraq be placed under strict inspection and monitoring. Iran's backing of international terrorism must be stopped. The proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and missile delivery systems to both Iran and Iraq must be halted. Third, in order to assure for both the security of Israel and the United States, we must provide an answer to the emerging threat that both Iran and Iraq pose to our future security, namely long-range ballistic missiles. Missile defense is an absolute imperative for our countries today. Israel is proud to be one of America's major international partners in missile defense development. It is our hope that Israel's own experiences in missile defense can help the United States and its allies in protecting their future security. In sum, restoring regional stability requires both diplomacy and deterrence. Let me close, however, with the following observation. The future of Israel is not just a matter for the Israelis that live there. Israel belongs to the entire Jewish people, and Israel would not be what is today if it were not for the efforts of all Jews worldwide, as well as of our friends, many of whom I see here tonight. Our destinies ties us together and remain firmly bound. Now I turn to your generation to stand by Israel at this critical hour. We have 3 main goals on our shared agenda. One is Aliyah, immigration to Israel. Then, a Zionist Jewish education. And continuing to build the foundations of the State of Israel. Now is the time to make Aliyah and join us in building the country. But if you cannot, I know I've been here many times in this country. Sometimes it worries me that one can live even here. I mean, not myself, but but if you cannot, it is also the time to visit. And it's important. You have to come and visit. And you'll find there is a normal life in Israel. Life is normal there. And send your children to learn and study in Israel. A Jewish and Zionist education is the key to Jewish survival. We can meet these challenges and make all our dreams come true. Together, we can make the Jewish people secure, make Israel safe and secure for generations. And Israel, which is a true island of democracy at peace, with a united Jerusalem as its eternal capital. Today, I feel the heavy responsibility of being Prime Minister. I always thought it's good to be a Prime Minister. I should admit, it's also hard. I'm ready to face the challenges and hopes that lie ahead. I'm hopeful that if we work together, we can live to see Israel reach its potential and take its place as a true light unto the nations. I would like to end with a quotation I used in my opening speech at the Knesset 2 weeks ago. It is taken from President Abraham Lincoln's presidential Please don't suspect me. Our president, Mr. Katsav, is going to serve another 6 years. So I'm not in a hurry. Maybe then, you know. But at least I would like to quote what Abraham Lincoln said on his presidential address on March 4th, 1865, and reflects my own feelings and aspirations upon assuming office. And I'm quoting, "With malice toward none, with charity for all, for firmness in the right, as God gives to us to see the right. Let us strive to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to do all which we may achieve and cherish a just and a lasting peace among ourselves and with all the nations." Thank you. you so much. Thank you.
We'll show you Prime Minister Ariel Sharon's speech to the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee banquet tomorrow morning at about 3:30 a.m. Eastern here on C-SPAN.